Hi again then guys, and welcome to what is, for the moment at least, going to be the final episode of Ultimate Exotics. It's been a really good series, and it's a shame to bring it to an end because they're some of the coolest cars of any racing game. They're usually the headline cars, and everyone loves supercars. I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't like at least some form of supercar. And this may seem a slightly strange car to end the series with. Not particularly because it's a bad car, but just because it's not necessarily an obvious choice. But to be honest, that's the exact reason why I'm ending the series with this car. The car is the Zonda, but specifically the Zonda C12. Not the C12S, not even the S, just the C12. The original Zonda. The car which essentially became a production vehicle as soon as it was a concept car, because Horacio Pagani was so confident that people would love the Zonda that he began making them before the concept was even released to the public. Now, over a decade on, he was certainly right, because people love the Zonda. The used prices of them are astronomical, far more than they cost when new, for every single version of the Zonda, and it's come to be known as one of the best supercars ever made. I personally consider it to be the best all-round supercar ever made. So why are we finishing with this particular version? Because after all, this is, to put it bluntly, the slowest of the Zondas. Well, for the very specific reason that this is a brilliant car that is kind of underappreciated. Now, whereas the S version uses a 7-litre V12 and the C12S uses a 7.3-litre V12, this car only uses a 6-litre V12. Now, it's still a Mercedes AMG engine, but it produces significantly less power than either of the other models, both in its stock form and fully tuned. In its stock form, it only puts out around 400 horsepower, which doesn't sound really that great for a supercar. But when this car was released back around the year 2000, there were far fewer supercars that really were dominating the scene. And the Zonda could do so much with that 400 horsepower that it became an instant benchmark. Now, on the game, that 6-litre V12 can be tuned up to a still pretty decent 871 horsepower, so it does produce far less power than either of the other first generation Zondas. They both produce over 1,000 horsepower. This also puts out 785 foot-pounds of torque, which is very impressive, and actually a really good ratio of power and torque in comparison to each other. But again, that's not too surprising given that Mercedes AMG engines are known for being very torquey. The car only weighs 1,152 kilos, which is reasonable, not ultra light, but reasonable, and it puts out 756 horsepower per tonne. The PP is, I would say, a pretty good 634, which is lower than many other supercars in the game, and I would say perfectly placed for this particular vehicle. But one of the best things about the Zonda C12 is the price. The C12S costs 1 million credits, which, although I would say is definitely worth that, it is at the end of the day not a premium car, and as fast as it is, that is a real shame for that kind of money. Even the S version, which is very similar to the C12S, just slightly inferior, is still a 450 grand machine, which is a lot cheaper, but still a lot. This car only costs 388,000 credits, so significantly cheaper than both of the other models, especially the 7.3. And 388 grand means that not only is it cheaper than the other Zondas, but it's actually one of the most affordable supercars in the game. Now, that being said, it does have less spec to work with, so how good is this car really? After all, you don't see very many people at all actually using it. For obvious reasons, why bother with this one when you've got two faster versions? Well, one reason why I would actually recommend trying this car out is because of just how fast it actually is. Having so much less power, you'd probably expect this car to be, say, on the same level as something like the Ferrari 599 or some of the lower spec Corvettes in terms of top speed and straight line performance. It's actually not. this is still a car capable of in excess of 280 miles per hour under its own power, which is seriously impressive given just how much power less it has than both of the other Zondas. The acceleration is still excellent on this car, and there are actually some slight visual differences on a side note with this version as well. The pointy nose cone that is visible on the S and C12S is not on this car, and there's also a slight difference with the rear wing. Whereas the other Zondas, especially the 7.3, have a very notable split rear wing, this car has a single, more conventional rear wing, and those are the two biggest differences between the two. The brake lights and various other things are also slightly different, but primarily the nose cone and the wing are the most noticeable differences. But going back to its performance, it's not just the straight line performance on this car which is excellent, and it really is excellent for a perhaps not obvious reason. It's easy on Gran Turismo to always think about just having the most power possible, and in supercars with over 1,000 horsepower, obviously they are going to be fast. But if you're in a situation where, say you're in a power-restricted race, where you're not allowed 1,000 horsepower or even less, or for instance a drag lobby, what are you going to do then? Well, you're going to have to choose something with significantly less power and probably significantly less speed. This car already has far less power than most other supercars to work with. But with that power, it's actually still as fast as many of what many people would consider the fastest cars in the game. So it's an excellent car for restricted power events in particular. It also works very well at its PP as a track car. And also, as I alluded to just now, it's not just a great straight line machine. The C12 is actually, I would say, the best handling of the three older Zondas by far. Now, that is a little bit skewed, of course, because it does have less power to deal with, but I would say by far it is the superior track car. But that's it overall, unless they add new supercars to the game, and I'll probably bring this series or one like it back for a future GT game, maybe GT Sport, GT7 or whatever. But we are, of course, replacing this series with a new series at the end of next week, and that series is going to be a very short one, and it's a series which you guys have actually asked for before. I'm always very positive in my reviews, but what if we had a series about the cars that I would say you shouldn't buy? Well, be sure to check that out next week, but for now, thanks for watching.